The reality is for like most small SaaS businesses, unless they're at a certain size and growing at a certain speed, they're still going to be kind of valued based on their SDE, on the profit of the business. Anything up to like $5 million, it's pretty rare to justify a revenue-based valuation unless the trajectory is crazy. And that can be like a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of SaaS sellers.
You're listening to Before You Buy or Sell a Business, hosted by Jared Johnson, the top SBA lender in the country. On this show, we break down business acquisitions, talk to industry pros, and provide real-world advice for buyers and sellers.
All right, welcome back to Before You Buy or Sell a Business. Today, I've got Andy Allaway and with Empire Flippers. How you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, cool. Maybe give us some history, your background, and what you do at Empire Flippers.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I'm Andy. I live in kind of the south of the UK, just west of London. And Empire Flippers, I'm the CEO of Empire Flippers. We're a marketplace for buying and selling online businesses. So yeah, we've been around kind of a decade or so now. We've got kind of the best part of 200 listings on our marketplace at the moment. E-commerce, SaaS, service businesses, content sites, all that kind of stuff. And we do transactions anywhere from 6 figures, slightly below, high 5 figures, up to 7 and 8 figure transactions as well.
Wow, I didn't realize you were doing larger transactions like that. That's great. Cool. So
yeah, I think we've done almost 100 7 or 8 figure transactions now. I think 90 something.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So, we'll kind of just talk through what Empire Flippers does, what you're seeing in the market. Obviously, a lot of the questions I get is where can I find listings and find deals? It's probably one of the hardest things that individuals struggle with when they're looking to buy a business. It always seems to be kind of a moving target. We get people that are hiring people to search for them, getting people that are kind of tired of some of the other platforms, maybe having stale listings. So hopefully we can dive into it and dissect a little bit more of what your group is about and how you can help people. So maybe we could start out, just give us an idea of the types of listings. Is there a very specific industry or type of seller that you're looking to onboard onto your platform?
Sure. Yeah. So we focus pretty much exclusively on online businesses, and what we mean by that really is kind of businesses that can be run from anywhere. So we don't tend to list a lot which has kind of like a physical presence or a local presence. I mean, some businesses will have warehousing and stuff. So there's not like a hard rule, but for the most part, we're focused on businesses that transact online. And, I guess like in the M&A industry or the online business acquisition industry, you have like two different ways, I would say, of doing it. You have kind of like more old school broker approach. They have like, a handful of listings or something like that. And then you have like the marketplaces with hundreds and hundreds of listings and kind of a bit more DIY, a bit more low touch. And we try to basically sit in the middle. So we do have like, industry leading tech in terms of our platform, and we have kind of a decent sized engineering team, but we also have a team of 40 something people who kind of help guide buyers and sellers through the process and help match them to businesses that make sense. One of the things that we do really differently is we have like a really stringent vetting process. So we list somewhere in the region of like 5% of the businesses that get submitted to us week to week, and all businesses go through our vetting process and kind of like we check all the information before we list them, basically.
Great. Yeah. So only 5% of listings. That's crazy. So what are some of the things that you're seeing that are sort of kicking a seller out that you're not allowing them to get the listing onto the platform?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixture of like some minimums and some hard rules we have, and then kind of some more judgment type stuff. So for example, there's a certain amount that we get each week, which is just below our minimum amount, maybe from an earnings perspective. There are certain niches that we try and stay away from. We don't really do much in like gambling, iGaming, anything like that. And then really beyond that, it comes down to can we list the business at a price which makes sense for the seller, but like also that we think we can get the business sold for as well. We don't charge any upfront fees or anything like that. So we only make money if we sell the business. So, we're not super interested in like listing businesses at crazy high multiples that we don't think are achievable. And so, yeah, I guess other things to layer on is like trends of the business. For businesses like significantly declining, then probably we won't list it. And again, it's kind of a sellability thing.
Great. I'm sure buyers listening will be very excited to hear that, as a lot of the listings that you kind of see out in the market tend to be overpriced or just simply haven't really been reviewed. Oftentimes, there are brokers that maybe don't have the right experience, or they're just listing it on what the seller is willing to sell just so they have some listings. So it's nice to hear that is something that you're actually paying attention to. So what's a normal process then if a seller came to you and said, I want to list my business? What are you looking at and what are you looking for?
Yeah. So if seller comes to us, the first thing we're going to have them do is submit the business to our vetting process, and that's a information gathering and checking into things kind of process. It varies a bit dependent on the business model. For quite a lot of we sell a lot of e-commerce businesses. For businesses that are selling on Amazon, Shopify, things like that, we have API integrations with all of them. So we'll kind of pull the numbers, we'll build the
Mm,
P&L. And then we kind of work with the seller on different expenses and cost of goods and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I guess we're doing two things there. One is we are checking the legitimacy of the business and the seller, and that we've sold 2,500 of these kind of businesses, so we kind of know what they should look for. We're looking for any red flags, stuff like that. And then at the same time, we're kind of also packaging that information up into a listing and a data room type presentation that we can then present to buyers. And so all of our listings look kind of uniform, and buyers know what to expect. Basically, we very rarely will we just take the seller's P&L and kind of upload it. We like to kind of put things in our own format and have everything kind of uniform.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So if you had a seller that, went through the process, you looked at it, you decided that, it's something that could qualify to be listed, are you working with them on the price that you feel it'll sell for, and then trying to see if they're comfortable with that price? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, basically. So the way that our kind of internal valuation tool works is it gives us a range to work in, takes in kind of a few factors, and then our vetting advisors, because they've vetted so many of these businesses, will kind of use their judgment alongside our sales data as well, and they'll say, "Hey, I know the tool gave you this kind of range. Based on these things in your business, we think like this is what's realistic." And we're willing to flex a little bit if a seller's like, "Yeah, I'd like to list a little higher than that," and kind of see. But we always just try to be like very candid about where we think the right price is. And then if a seller wants to go slightly higher than that, or slightly lower if they have particular urgency, then that's fine. But they kind of do it eyes wide open of what we're seeing in the market, basically.
Okay, makes sense. I'm assuming you get a lot of sellers that are a little out of touch with how the valuation process works, and most likely thought that it was worth more, and so it's probably a challenging thing getting them to get comfortable with that. And I would assume there's some that will come back to you later, maybe after kind of thinking about it and deciding. Um, what are some things that sellers could do when they're thinking about selling that would make it easier for you to sell? And then, of course, even just make it onto the platform to be allowed to be sold.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, all sellers, like I do with our business, think that kind of the business is special and it's their baby and it's personal, right? So, of course, we totally get it. There's a few things a few ways we see that kind of show up. One is particularly in our industry where we've gone through a period, say 3 to 5 years ago, where valuations did get really inflated. I mean, like everything was inflated when interest rates were at zero, right? But in particular, Amazon FBA businesses, there was a lot of buyers for those, and so their valuations did go crazy. A lot of sellers who maybe kind of like missed the opportunity to sell there are still kind of like psychologically married to what their business would have been worth a few years ago. So part of it is like it's understanding that the market has changed since then, And that really, like, that was the anomaly period. Like, sellers will often be like, well, I'll just wait for the next one of those periods to come around. And we've had like 2 years like that in the 8 or 9 years that I've been at Empire Flippers. So yeah, that's part of it. I think one thing that sellers can do, particularly so valuations aren't a surprise when they come to it, is like get a really good handle on their numbers and their books. Because particularly with like inventory based businesses, where like profit, cash flow, and revenue are all like very, very different things. And it's crazy how often, even with like relatively large e-commerce businesses, sellers will come to us, and by the time we've like properly accounted for their cost of goods and the months that products sell and stuff like that, they're like, wow, like I'm actually not making the profit that I thought I was in the business. So I think like getting ahead of the numbers is kind of a real big one, so that it's not a surprise, basically.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I would assume that it's sort of a big divide between people that completely get it and people that don't. And I would assume on the larger transactions, you're seeing people that probably have in-house accounting, have a better handle on their numbers, the process, how the business runs, all those kind of things that go into typically leading to a higher multiple. Um, when you're when you're working through that and you get somebody that you feel comfortable with, or they're willing to list at the price that you're doing, what becomes kind of the process then on getting it completely put together and then to the actual point where it's listed?
Yeah, sure. So once the valuation is agreed, then our vetting team kind of prepare all of the information. We'll, on our kind of public listing page, we'll build out a kind of a redacted listing page, basically, that gives general niche, monetization, all this kind of stuff. Doesn't give specifics of the business or anything like that. And then we also we have a huge engine operating the buyer side of our marketplace, where we're going out, we're finding buyers. All buyers on our marketplace kind of go through our two-step verification process. So we verify their ID, and then we do some kind of like liquidity verification as well, whether it's like personal or the company they're representing. And then when a listing is on our marketplace, through our platform, those buyers can then go, and they can, if they have the right liquidity amount, they can unlock the kind of the confidential aspects of the listing. And then we have a kind of six person sales team as well, who will be out there speaking to buyers all the time. And when a new listing goes live, which and we're using AI on all of this stuff as well, but like when they a new listing goes live, which they think will be a fit for buyers they're working with, then they'll kind of present it to them as well. And then we'll be helping the seller manage that back and forth with buyers, kind of fielding questions. We always aim to kind of get them on a buyer seller call, where a buyer can ask questions about the business. And then, at that point, hopefully solicit offers and letters of intent and stuff like that.
Do you have a minimum time period that you require them to list with you?
Yeah, it's only 2 months.
Okay.
And our average, which is short in the industry, and to be honest, it varies a lot based on the size. But like our average, days to sell is probably a bit more than that. It's probably like 3 months, if you like taking into account any exclusive due diligence and stuff like that. But the reason we do it at 2 months is because for starters, we're only listing businesses that we think we can sell, right? And then even if we haven't sold it after 2 months, generally we're going to have a pretty good idea of whether we think we are or not. We'll see what the buyer interest is like, how many questions they're getting and stuff like that. And then we can have, an honest conversation with the seller and be like, look, we think we're on the right track and we have good interest here. We think maybe like this one we might need to slightly reduce the price, or just like, hey, this one hasn't taken. And then sellers can kind of decide how they want to proceed after that, basically.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. So what's the average amount of, the percentage or likelihood that you end up selling the listings on your site?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough stat to nail down. Again, a lot of these stats, because we sell 50, 60K sites, typically, we'll very often sell those in like 2 days, that we'll just list them and the cash will come in. And then obviously on the 7 and 8 figure deals, it's a longer process and kind of less of them close. So it's kind of tricky, but I guess across the board, I mean, we're probably, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to make up a number actually, because I haven't checked that ahead of this call. And
Yeah.
my number's
I
probably a
would
little
assume
bit
it'd
out
be
of
higher
date.
than just a traditional type listing, probably.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
it
good.
should be. I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, we'll switch gears a little bit to buyers. So you already mentioned that you go through sort of a vetting process. What does that process entail exactly?
Yeah. So, up front is kind of the ID and the liquidity checks. That's like the minimum that any buyer has to do before they can kind of get access to listings in their price range. But on top of that, I mean, like I say, we are very much a people-led business. And so every buyer who signs up on our marketplace, our sales guys will be attempting to call them and understand their criteria and to match them to listings, but also to like make sure they're legit as well and that we're not kind of wasting sellers' time. So we kind of go through all of that. And then yeah, as I was kind of saying, the other thing that we are doing a lot of at the moment as well is kind of like AI buyer matching as well. We've been using HubSpot since day one basically, and we have thousands and thousands of HubSpot notes, in our CRM. Spoke to this buyer, they're looking at like this kind of listing in this niche, and then that note in HubSpot gets completely forgotten about. 9 times out of 10, that person probably left the company a few years ago. And so, a really nice use case for us for AI is to like take all of those notes, feed it into an LLM, and then when we have new listings go live, we'll kind of try and match them up like that. Basically, that's working really nicely, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny because I get a lot of people that reach out to me and I start working with them and then they say, okay, I decided not to buy this listing that we, started working on. And then there are times where I'll see a listing from a broker or another buyer will fall through. And I sort of have to go through and kind of dig through notes and try to find somebody or try to remember that, oh, they
Yeah,
wanted, that type of business. So it's a good way of,
yeah.
of you being able to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. And we're on average we're adding about 50 like fully verified new buyers a week. So we track that stat, and it basically means they verified their ID, their liquidity, and they unlocked their first listing.
mm,
And so yeah, when you're kind of adding them at that volume across multiple different salespeople, any kind of the best intention of like managing it manually is
yeah.
impossible. So yeah, it's been super helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then are you charging the buyers anything?
No. So
Okay,
so
great.
we are I mean we have a very very straightforward business model, which is like if we agree a fee up front with the seller, and if we sell your business, then we kind of take that as a percentage of the sale price. That's basically it. No charge to the buyers.
Okay. So in the last, let's say 5 years, what do you think are maybe one or two of the biggest things that you've seen change in the industry? And then obviously on the, a little bit more niche with being either e-commerce or, something that you can run remotely. What are you seeing in that industry?
So, I mean, I think the biggest thing we've seen over the last 5 years is just as money has got harder to get, from kind of like the 0% interest rate time, buyers have got pickier. And we see that show up in a few ways. I mean, like I say, that 2019 to 2022, something like that, there was a pure seller's market. We would in kind of the similar that I said, we put up a small business now and we have, multiple offers in days. That was happening on 7-figure businesses. We would put
Wow.
up these big e-commerce businesses and we'd have the different kind of e-commerce aggregators basically, fighting for them. And I think when you look at the last few years, um, we had like 2023 was like the switchover year. And to be honest, that was a really tough year for us as a business because that was the year where sellers were still very much married to those valuations, but buyers had shifted entirely. And it was kind of funny because we still got quite a lot of deals under LOI in 2023. But particularly on the larger ones, whereas like a year or two prior, if something always comes up in due diligence on these big deals, but one or the other party would be like, "Oh yeah, no worries, kind of take that out on my side, not a problem." But because like where the market had changed, we were getting deals under LOI. Sellers were coming in feeling like they were at their rock bottom price. Buyers were coming into DD feeling like that, I couldn't pay a kind of a cent more for this. And so we found that like the same deals, but like the same small issues would come up and they would end up tanking deals. So 2023 was a tough year. And then the last couple of years have been much improved. And I think a big part of that is just, sellers kind of understand that the market has moved a little bit. So I'd say that's like one big trend is just buyers have got more careful, and as part of that as well, we're seeing, I guess, two things added into that. One is more creative deal structures, particularly on the large deals. Again, just as a function of demand. Buyer is a little bit more of a buyer's market now, so buyers are getting creative with deal terms. Almost pretty much every deal that goes through our marketplace is majority cash up front. And like 9 times out of 10, heavy majority cash up front. But we definitely have seen more financing over the last couple of years and different kinds of earnouts. And then the other thing that we've seen in the last few years is like more external financing, whether it's bank lending or some SBA. Back in the kind of the peak period of that kind of 2021 craziness, we actually wouldn't even do SBA deals
Oh, wow.
because the process was so long in terms of, I think back then as well, SBA lenders were a little more nervous around online businesses and with lack of assets and stuff like that. But we didn't want to tie businesses up for 90 days because we knew we would have like multiple cash buyers for them and it would be better for the
Mm.
seller. And now we do see, we've got a couple of deals now that are going through the SBA process, and we've closed a bunch over the last couple of years. So yeah, we are much more open to that. And that's just more of a reality in the market now.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. I noticed that as well from 2020 to maybe towards the end of 22, beginning of 23. It did seem like we had a lot of buyers come into the market that hadn't been there before,
Mm.
and just sort of either were looking heavily or bought something. And so it was very easy to get transactions to sort of move and come together. I think the bank financing was a little bit easier as well at that point. And then we saw a pretty big shift where it's slowed it down a little bit, but we're seeing the buyer pool, in my opinion, is a lot more well qualified. But then
Hmm.
with that, they sort of understand that and they're much better at due diligence now. So I'm seeing
Yeah.
deals take a little bit longer, them kind of requiring the deals to be a little bit more clean, financials, records to be a little bit easier to read and go through.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're kind of sort of renegotiating or retrading the deal and trying to get things to line back up based on the due diligence that they saw. So, do you feel that that is where we're headed and that we're going to continue to see that, or that it's going to get, you know, harder to get deals together? What's kind of your opinion on the next couple of years, what we're going to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I totally see that as well as you kind of outlined it. I think like particularly in the specifically the online business M&A space, I think one of the things we've seen is just like a general maturing of the market and the people in the market. Like our background many years ago is selling like small content sites and small e-commerce stores. And when I joined in 2017, it really was like we would put 10 listings up on a Monday. Most of them would be like 5 or 6 figures list price. And we used to have a thing called the wire race, right? Where literally we would have multiple people sending us like 6 figures for a business within hours of the email going out.
Wow.
And we had a rule that like basically whichever money hit the account first, that was kind of who the business went to. And so I think like as you like the space has just got more sophisticated, definitely buyers and their due diligence. I mean, back then we wouldn't really have that many exclusive due diligence periods. Everyone would just do their DD at the same time and then someone would buy it. Now, I mean, yeah, probably 70-80% of the deals that go through are having like 2 weeks, 4 weeks exclusive DD, more on the bigger ones, particularly if there's financing involved. And buyers are either bringing in third party DD companies to look at it, or like you say, are just very sophisticated themselves. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think it continues to get harder and harder from here. But I think like maybe the step change has already happened, and it was a pretty big one. Like it took us a little while to adjust, because it used to be that like deals would just go through on our standard terms, and the money would be in the bank. And so we had to adjust a little bit to like, no, we had like LOIs and exclusive DD periods, and all of this is just what's expected now.
Yeah, I remember probably 5 years ago somebody saying, "Well, I'm going to do quality of earnings," and I kind of said, "Okay, I know I've heard of that, but
Right,
let's
right.
talk about." And now it's probably 70% of the transactions I'm working on, which as a
Mm,
bank I'm totally fine with and sort of appreciate, but it does bring up the fact that it could slow things down and ultimately could end up killing a deal. But I guess if you're looking at it from the seller side or listing side, if there's something that truly needs to be uncovered, then it's not that they just decided they didn't like the listing. There's something there that needed to be uncovered. Once it was uncovered, then it's fair to ask for an adjustment or to walk away.
Totally. And that, by the way, that's something that we try to police as well. So we get it in due diligence, things will come up. That's the point of due diligence. And if a buyer like goes into DD with proper intentions and something comes up and they renegotiate, then like, of course, no problem at all. But if we think buyers are like getting an LOI agreed just so that they can go in and kind of like then readjust the offer no matter what, we'll be pretty strict about not letting that buyer take more deals under DD because it's bad for the seller. It's obviously just bad for us as well. So yeah, to be honest, we don't see a lot of that. I think, I don't know because we do good checks up front or again, because like most of the people in the space now are a bit more sophisticated, well-intentioned. We don't really see a lot of that, to be honest.
Yeah, that was one of the big problems that we saw in the kind of quote unquote search community. There was a lot of people that came in and said, I want to be a searcher, and we're just blasting LOIs out. And
Mm,
the sellers and the brokers were getting really tired of it. But now I do feel like they've gotten better. They've sort of learned the people that are searching now are truly searching and they have it
right.
together and they understand what they're looking for. So we're seeing a really good correction there, but I feel like there's still a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth of both parties. So trying to
Mm,
get them to get together so we can push the market forward.
yeah, makes sense.
What is something that maybe you're working on or you think needs to happen in the industry?
So yeah, the kind of first thing that comes to mind is something that we're working on, and that is just in the last few months. Actually, we've started, I guess, co-brokering or letting other brokers list their listings on our marketplace. And it kind of came about, I wouldn't say by accident, but it was something that like I was quite personally quite resistant to for quite a long time. I think like our USP is how rock solid our process is. All our businesses are vetted the same. The information is the same. If you call us, we're going to call you back, all that kind of stuff. And I was really worried about opening our marketplace up to like other brokers and watering down that experience. But a couple of members of my management team were pushing like very hard that they thought we should be doing it. And they brought me one listing and they said, look, we really know this broker. We trust him. He's great. Can we try it and just kind of see how it goes? And it was a $6.5 million agency, great business, and we found a phenomenal buyer for it in like 30 days.
Oh, wow.
And it went through perfectly. It closed seamlessly. The broker was over the moon. Obviously, we made a good fee on it as well. Buyer and seller super happy. So I was like, okay, I guess I was wrong about this. I guess we're in the co-brokering game now. And it just this quarter, we still don't want to go super wide with it, but we set a goal this quarter to like add a few more listings. I probably had 10 conversations with different brokers. And honestly, I've been surprised like how big the appetite is to kind of list businesses on our marketplace. I think we've got like another 7 or 8 co-broker deals up now for a variety of brokers. And so yeah, that I really see that as a huge opportunity because we have we have a huge buyer audience. And I think it's good for brokers. Obviously, they want to sell their deals. That's good for them. But I think it really helps us become like the place where deals are, right? The more good deals we can have on our marketplace, the better. It's an interesting way for us to try out business models that maybe aren't our core focus or aren't our strong suit as well. So like we sell some app businesses, but we don't do many apps. So like, if we had brokers who specialize in apps that wanted to list through us, that could kind of be super helpful. Similarly, like we do some non-English language businesses, but we're not great at it. And we kind of like, same there, like maybe there's an opportunity to find some brokers who specialize in that and kind of build out what we offer to buyers basically. So that's an interesting thing where we have high hopes for.
Yeah, I like it. It makes sense. So I would assume it's still the same type of listing though, right? So the listing that the broker's bringing still sort of meet the normal qualifications that you're looking for.
So they do at the moment in terms of like business type and things like that. Obviously it's more interesting for us on the big businesses because there's kind of a bit more to kind of spread around. I will say though that and we're much more flexible on like, if a broker wants to list at a certain price, even if it's not how we would value the business, we'll clearly mark it up on the listing page that this is a co-broker deal.
Mm.
And we're more flexible on stuff like that, basically.
That makes sense. Yeah. At the end of the day, you want to keep a good reputation of actually listing stuff how it should be and getting it sold and off the platform. And if you allow a bunch of brokers on that are putting stuff on, that becomes sort of just another place where people are frustrated with listings. You don't want that to happen. Makes sense.
Exactly. And, it's still, the listings go through a vetting process of sorts. It's not exactly the same as our standard listings, but we still check some stuff. And again, it's another reason why like we're working with a very small number of brokers at the moment and trying to like build relationships rather than just like, hey, 100 brokers come and kind of list your businesses on Empire Flippers. Then it gets like a lot harder for us to control.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So you'd mentioned some of the Amazon stuff that was selling quickly, and some of the stuff you had seen historically. Are you seeing a very specific industry or type of store or anything that is selling more now? Are there some that you feel like are starting to gain traction that probably we'll see in the future being something that's listed a lot more?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in e-commerce specifically, one kind of change that happened a couple of years ago, I wouldn't say it's actually been as big a change as maybe I would have said a year or two ago, but during kind of the peak times, just pure 100% Amazon businesses were selling like hotcakes. Alongside like buyers getting a little bit more fussy about what they want these days, I think buyers do value some sales that are coming like for a Shopify store or through some other marketplace and like some spreading of risk. That said, we do still sell quite a lot of like 100% Amazon businesses. So I'd say like that's a trend, but it's not a complete switch. And then, I mean, outside of that, I mean, over the last kind of one interesting one over the last couple of years, we've sold a lot of YouTube channels,
Huh.
which is an interesting one. And kind of like people build them as like faceless YouTube channels, whether they're could be news sites or just could be on a specific topic, but with graphics instead of the person's face. They tend to be pretty cool businesses, relatively stable in terms of income. Most of the people set them up so that they're quite turnkey. They'll have a guy that does the thumbnail, someone who does the script or whatever, and quite often the seller's secret sauce is like picking the right topics and stuff like that, and they'll often stay on with the buyer to kind of help teach them that bit. But they tend to be pretty nicely productized, and some of them are quite big as well. Buyers really like them.
Huh, I didn't even know that was a thing, obviously, yeah, having a YouTube channel is a lot of times just trying to put information out for people and not trying to monetize it, but I didn't think about that you could do it that way because it is faceless, so it's not like, a very specific person that you have to keep talking and being in front of the camera, so that's very interesting.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, exactly. And I think particularly as, over the last couple of years, a lot of sites that depended on Google for traffic have struggled with different updates and stuff like that. And I think, the YouTube algorithm has been kind of like the search engine that people have been betting on over the last few years.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, my wife has an e-commerce business, and that's probably been one of the toughest things is trying to keep up with the SEO and trying to understand, how it keeps changing. And there's the competitors somehow will figure it out first, and then things move up and down, and you're not getting as
Mm.
much traffic, and so it can be frustrating to keep up with. So that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we still sell blogs, content sites that could be monetized by display ads or affiliate links, stuff like that. But it used to be an enormous part of our business, and it is definitely kind of like a minority now. Some of it is the update, some of it is like AI as well. I mean, that whole kind of how you source information piece is just kind of in flux, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. I'll put you on the spot here. So, what's probably the biggest difference between a US based buyer and a UK buyer?
It's a good question. I mean, the majority of our buyers are US based buyers. It's pretty interesting mix. So our sellers are very like spread around geographically. They still tend to be targeting the US market more often than not. But yeah, a lot of our buyers are in the US. The difference between a US and a UK buyer. Um, I don't know.
Maybe
I
how
feel
they
like I
say soccer or football. I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean,
it could be. It
could be
could
one of
be.
them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm a lot more Americanized than your average Brit because we're a US LLC. Huge part of our team is kind of American. So yeah, I feel like I'm in the US zeitgeist a bit.
Yeah, it's probably good either way as long as they buy one of the listings, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's a on uncommon opinion that you have when it comes to the acquisition space?
Um, so an uncommon opinion I have, obviously a lot of thoughts at the moment are like, what does AI disrupt? How does AI disrupt? And so I don't know if this is uncommon, but one thing I feel pretty strongly is that when you look at the different business models, I think e-commerce, whether it's on Amazon, off Amazon, kind of D2C, is like one of the best business models to be in at the moment. And historically, if you were going to say, okay, what type of business could we get that the most buyers are going to be interested in? It'd be a SaaS business, right? Because recurring, generally high technical moat. But I think that monetization is a lot more under threat from AI
Mm.
and when I look at the AI use cases in e-commerce, a lot of it seems to be like additive, like better ways of like using information and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you still need whatever that you can't AI that physical product that comes in the mail at the end of like an e-commerce transaction. So like we always like look over the fence at people in our space selling SaaS businesses, and we're like, oh, we should go after SaaS. We should, SaaS businesses are great, but at the moment we're just betting more and more on e-commerce. And yeah, I still think that's the right bet personally.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is the AI is only going to help the e-commerce companies if they use it properly, whereas it could completely replace a good majority of what people are doing in SaaS. I didn't think about it that way. That definitely makes sense. The other problem I think with SaaS is the multiples are so high, right? So like, yes, they do provide recurring revenue most of the time. There is typically a challenge in trying to come in and sort of take market share away from them. But as you mentioned, there was probably thousands of businesses that went away almost immediately every time that there's an update to ChatGPT or any of the other AI platforms. So yeah, that could be a little scary. And as you mentioned, they're not going to get rid of that actual tangible product at the end of the day, but hopefully it helps you reach customers better, get the product out quicker, maybe even
Right.
have it made properly quicker. So it'll help with the consumer demands of wanting things now.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but half the time I go on Amazon, I'm like annoyed if I can't get it the same day or the next morning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so crazy to think how far we come. Where I used to have to wait a week and you'd be okay with it, and now, like, what do you mean I can't have this by 5 today? That's crazy. So
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes things turn up at my house from Amazon, and I feel a little embarrassed that I've ordered this like one thing comes in a huge packaging, and I'm like, oh, that might not be the best. But yeah, I mean, with SaaS businesses, I mean, you're right. I mean, obviously, you said earlier about like when sellers think their business is maybe worth more than kind of we tell them. Nowhere is that truer than a SaaS seller, right? And I think there's a couple of things there. I mean, they do command higher valuations, to be clear, generally. But the thing is, like a lot of SaaS sellers are like, oh, you know, Uber is X times revenue. Like I should be valued on revenue. And the reality is for like most small SaaS businesses, unless they're at a certain size and growing at a certain speed, they're still going to be kind of valued based on their SDE on the profit of the business. You have to, anything up to like $5 million, it's pretty rare to justify a revenue based valuation unless the trajectory is crazy. And that can be like a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of SaaS sellers.
yeah, we have those conversations quite a bit. I think Shark Tank and then some of the VCs sort of ruined that for a lot of businesses, and it sort of spills over to other ones that don't really understand valuation. And
Hmm.
normally what I try to get them to understand is if you're looking at it based on revenue, that's because if you're looking at large M&A, when they're buying it, they're eliminating a large amount of the expenses. So if you really go
Right.
back and look at it the same way, they could still be looking at it as SDE. It's just the SDE after they eliminate all those expenses that end up being doubled up. So makes sense.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And kind of related to that on all business models, another thing that the sellers will often be a little bit like confused about is they'll talk about how much opportunity there is in the business and like how that should increase the valuation. And of course, like I always say to sellers, like you have to like put yourself in the buyer's shoes. And if you say that to a buyer, the first thing a buyer thinks is like, well, if there's that much opportunity, why would you be selling the business, right? So
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
kind of have to, you either have to realize it and it's baked into the profit already, or what opportunity there is. I mean, that's why the buyer's buying the business, right?
Yeah, definitely. So cool. Well, this has been great. I have two final questions for you. So first one, do you have a mentor or have you ever had a mentor?
I mean, I would say I've had an early manager of mine because like I love online business, but like I'm particularly passionate about like managing and leadership and that kind of thing. So I had like an early boss back in the corporate world who like taught me a lot about kind of managing and stuff like that, and I still keep in touch with him today. Um, yeah, that's probably it, I think. Other than that, my mentors are people that don't know me that I read about in books.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, you could always learn from other people, and reading will never send you the wrong way. Hopefully. Okay, final question. What motivates you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think so. So there's some like company business specific stuff that motivates me. We have a team of 40 something people. We're 100% remote company, right? So like pre-COVID, we've been built remote from the ground up. We've never had an office. When I joined Empire Flippers in 2017, and the first thing I did was I had to actually, it was part of the role. I flew out and lived in Vietnam for a year, and
Oh
then my
wow.
wife and I we kind of traveled around, and like that was like paradigm shifting for me. And so now, like, I'm very driven by the fact that we have 40 people who can live wherever they want in the world. We try and be like very flexible with like how we work and like vacations and stuff like that. So I hope that we run a company that like gives people a good life where work is a part of it, but is kind of not everything. So that's kind of like my Empire Flippers answer. And then, outside of that is, my family. I got a little boy who just started school a couple of weeks ago, and so yeah, that's kind of it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, that's great. Great answer. Yeah, I think having children will motivate you usually in the right way. So you start
Totally.
looking at things a little differently when especially the older they get, the more you can interact with them, and the more time you spend with them, you start thinking about things differently. So makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's been excellent. What is the best way for someone to find you or find your company?
Yeah, so empireflippers.com if you're kind of interested in buying or selling businesses. And if anyone wants to connect with me personally, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So that's a good place to find me there.
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Really enjoyed it, Jared. Thanks.
Thank you all for listening to Before You Buy or Sell a Business. If you found value in this episode, please follow the show, leave a positive review, and share it with someone. For more information, check out jaredwjohnson.com. We'll see you all next time.